Hi, this is Jordan from Out and About in Japan and Moving Japan. And yesterday, after a ton of effort, I finally received my Japanese driver's license. Done in the Kagoshima Prefecture, and I was at least the first foreign national to receive it under the new guidelines, possibly the first person to receive it under the new stricter guidelines that started in October of 2025. So I just want to tell you a little bit about the process to help you get through it, because it was one of the more stressful things that I've done in my life, surprisingly enough. So this part of the video, I'll just talk about the first half, which is getting through the written test and the process just to get there. And then I'll make another video about getting through the driving portion of it, which is significantly more challenging. So the first part of the process is just getting your appointment and getting to the point where you can actually take your written test. So mine took forever. I started the process back in April of 2024, thinking it wouldn't take, April 2025, thinking it wouldn't take that long to get an appointment there, but it took forever. So even though I started applying in April, they want you to send in all your documentation ahead of time. So I was working with some Japanese friends to get that accomplished, sending things constantly to the driver's license center. They kept asking for more documents. They needed copies of things like passports and passport pages and flight itineraries of when I first came to Japan. My original American driver's license, copies of that, an official Japanese translation, which you can get at JAF, that they need, along with many other things, and that took months to do. It was surprisingly slow. So by the time I actually had an appointment scheduled, it wasn't until early October 2025, 5.5 months later, that I was finally able to get my appointment. And I don't think it was much of a coincidence, since there was a talk for months about the new harsher standards, more difficult standards for international folks looking to get a driver's license in Japan, that my testing was pushed off until October. So I was going to be part of the first wave of people going through that process. So after I finally got all my paperwork in, they scheduled my date, which was October 7th, to go in and actually start the process, possibly to take all the tests, although it didn't quite happen that day. So I drove to the driver's license office in the testing center, which is about an hour away from me. And the first part was the interview. So you have all your documents. Make sure you bring a nice folder with all your documents clearly organized, your recent set of photos that are the perfect size that you can get at little booths at the mall or in front of drugstores or all over the place here in Japan. So they started checking my documents that they said they already had the copies of, because we've been dealing with this for months. So I sat down, they started asking for things, and one of my documents, they said they didn't have the original, even though I definitely sent it because I had nothing left at my house. So they needed an original again of the official translation from my Alaska driver's license into Japanese. So I said I didn't have that. I already sent it in. I said, well, can you go home and check? And he's like, well, I live like an hour to an hour and a half away from here, so I cannot do that. So he was pretty bummed out. But he went through all the other documents, including flight itineraries I'd already sent, but it wasn't the exact flight itinerary they were looking for. They wanted a very specific one about when I first came to Japan in a certain way, so I said, okay, I need to get that too. He said, can you print it out? I was like, well, not here. I got to drive home to get that. So I had to come back. I had to reschedule. I said, come back on Friday. So I went home. I printed out the flight itinerary that they were looking for my trip, essentially over a year ago, where I first came to Japan. And I needed to go to the JAF website and have my Alaska American driver's license translated Japanese again, because I did not have the original copy. Luckily, it's a very quick turnover. I think it's less than 2 days. So I was able to get that done. It costs like 4,000 yen to have that happen. And then you can get it printed out like a convenience store. It's a one-time print. So I got the original of that, came back on that Friday, and sat down and went through the interview again. So I was able to go through the interview. A lot of what, at least they were asking me during the interview, and keep in mind, like I've been here a year, but I don't speak a lot of Japanese, just a very little bit of Japanese. So Google Translate was my friend. Cell reception is very weak in Japan, so luckily my interview was like next to a window, where I had the phone like right next to the window, and most of the things he was asking, we could communicate well enough with each other. But there was a few things I had to use Google Translate for, and it was totally fine. But a lot of what they were asking about was kind of like driving history things, and not necessarily like have you been in accidents or anything like that, but it's all about like how did you learn to drive. So did you go through a driving school? So for me it was like yeah, I wasn't expecting these questions. I was like, yeah, like 30 years ago, like when I was in high school, I went through a driving school, and they wanted to know a little bit of details about that. And of course I was just like, I don't really know. So I was just kind of trying to do the best I could to remember what the details were from that driving school. Also, they wanted to know about like written tests, like what written tests did you take to get this license? And since I've lived in so many different states in America, I was basically just going off the last one. I was like, it was whatever, 20, 30 questions, how long did it take you to do it? I didn't know how many questions it took on my original driver's license, from Massachusetts 30 years ago. But essentially they want to know, okay, did you go to a driving school of some form or another? Did you have to do a written test? And then they're asking like, well, what was the actual driving exam like? So I was just telling them what kind of driving test, a practical driving test. They wanted to know how long it was. I was like, well, I don't know, like 20 minutes. I really don't know. And then like what environment was it? Was it rural? Was it a city? And I was like, oh, it was kind of, urban environment, traffic lights and crosswalks and things like that. So that seemed to satisfy him, essentially knowing that I had kind of the driving educational background, and that possibly they wouldn't say like, oh, you need to go to a driving school first before you can even do this. So I got through that part. The interview was pretty quick. It's like 5-10 minutes. So that part is pretty simple. And then they take all your documents, including your originals, so make sure you have your residence card, your driver's license, all the passport, just anything original you can. They should have the original of most other things, but it's good to bring copies, even though they won't accept copies of most things. So just be prepared. So then I had to sit in the waiting room again, and it was, they said, oh, we're going to verify your documents now. So I was like, okay, maybe this will be like an American verification where they're like, okay, it looks good, 20 seconds later, you're ready to go. But this is the Japanese documents verification. So I was in there, I think, hour and 15 minutes in the waiting room. And I was the only one who had done the interview. Like, they were just in there certifying my documents for slightly over an hour. So they're very detailed on it. So bring a book to read, bring something to do, because you're going to be there for a while. After they verified that all my documents were correct, then I could move on to the next part of the process, which is moving forward towards the test. So I had to go to a counter and pay the 2,500 yen to start the testing process. So you pay that, and as you'll learn later, you pay that every time you come. So if you fail the written test or the practical test, it's the same fee every time. Now it used to be a one-time fee, but now it's every single time, 2,500 yen. So be prepared, have cash, and then have some extra in case you pass everything. You need your actual driver's license that day. So I paid the fee, and then you go to an eye exam machine, it's like the size of a van. It's like this old clunky machine you look at, and there's like little C's with little gaps in them. So you just up, down, right, left, down, whatever. That takes like 10 seconds. They verify your vision, and then it's back to the waiting room. And then you're sitting there. For me, it was probably another half an hour, 45 minutes at least, until the designated time where you can take the written test. And it was just me and one other foreign national taking the written test. So they put us into like a little classroom, and of course they had us separated by rows so we wouldn't cheat off each other. And you're facing the clock, and they give you all the instructions. Very easy to understand. It's just a simple test. Essentially, they give you the test book, and then it's your test sheet where you're just marking with a pencil just the true or false. So that part's pretty easy. And they give you exactly half an hour. And I mean, they're looking at the clock, and they're going to wait for the minute to change before they say, okay, half an hour, go. And it's 50 questions. Apparently before this October, you didn't even have to study. It was like very common sense questions. But now you need to study. Like, you need to look at that Japan Automobile Federation Rules of the Road book. You need to be familiar with that. You need to read it all the way through, all the different chapters. I had read it through a number of times, so I felt pretty comfortable taking the test. But even with that, as I got to like question 3, I realized, oh, this test is on everything in the book. I kind of had skimmed through like moped things and like disaster response. I was just like, oh, I'm sure that's just like for your information, but no, the test is on everything. So there's questions about driving a moped, because your basic Japanese driver's license will authorize you to drive a moped, the low power one. So question 3 was like, oh, should your feet be forward and your knees hugging the gas tank or something like that? And I was like, I don't know. Yes, sure, sounds good. But then there's also questions about like, how to secure the load on your vehicle with ropes. What's the right way to do that? And then you might get a question about like, well, if the load on your vehicle falls off in the road, do you stop or do you keep going and then call to the police? So there's, to me, a little more obscure questions like that. There's some very simple common sense ones. There's some traffic scenarios that to me were fairly common sense. There was one that I was like, I don't know this one, and I just usually did the testing philosophy and just went with my first guess. But I went to look at the book afterwards. I was like, I still don't know. But it was one where it was like, there's lane A and lane B, and there's a solid yellow line here and a solid white line here. Can this car cross over the solid white line to this lane? And I was like, oh, yes. Like, I don't know. I still don't know. If you know the answer, like, put it down below, because I don't know if you can cross a solid yellow and a solid white line, if you can cross over that white line to get into the area with the solid yellow. I don't know. So I just guessed on that one. You have to know your traffic signs. There's a number of traffic signs in there, and there's a number of different tests apparently too. So you're not going to get maybe the same test as the person behind you, or if you go in a second time, you might not get the same test. So study that whole book. There was like disaster preparedness questions too. Like if you're driving and an earthquake happens, like what do you do? Is it like, can you just ignore all the things and get to your home, or should you still obey traffic signs? And it's like, yeah, you should probably still obey traffic signs. And I know someone else got one about if you have to abandon your vehicle in an earthquake, what do you do? And it's like, oh, you leave the keys in it in an obvious spot and like pull off as far as you can off the road. So yeah, know that whole book, know every section of it, because the test is not so easy now. The person I tested with, they didn't pass that day. They got like half of them wrong. So yeah, know the material. I passed. If you pass, like they don't tell you how many you got wrong. So, but you can only get 5 wrong out of 50 questions. So you got to get at least 45. So it's, yeah, you got to know your stuff. I can't tell you which ones I got right or wrong, because they don't let you know. And if you get, if you fail that day, like they won't tell you which ones you got wrong. So you don't know, like, oh, okay, I got most of it wrong, but I just need to remember how to do X, Y, and Z. Like, now you got to just kind of start from be like, okay, I got to just read this book again and try to remember like some of the questions in there. So just keep that in mind. Try to, if you can, like everything else, try to pass it in one go just by being familiar with that book. So I did happen to pass on my first try. So then it was back to the waiting room. In the waiting room, at least where I am in Kagoshima, there's the screen up there and it tells you like the course of the day. So the courses will switch. Down here there's supposedly 3 different courses for the international drivers. Right now they're only using 2 of them apparently, course 1 and course 2. And there's a little book on the side. There's a bunch of books out there, so I had to use Google Translate to be like, okay, which one is, because there are different driving courses for different vehicles, different size vehicles, motorcycles, large vehicles, standard vehicles, international, Japanese. So I was like, okay, check many times to make sure, like, okay, I've got the maps for the international driving test standard vehicle. So I took pictures of all those just so I could study them. That day I think it was course 2. So I studied the map endlessly for course 2. But that kind of brings you to the practical test, and that's kind of a nightmare to take. It's incredibly difficult. I've got a very robust driving background, professional driver certificates, and I did not pass on the first, second, third. I did not pass. It took me a while. So I'll tell you how I got through that in the next video, and at least maybe walk you through the Kagoshima course and what they were expecting down there. So if you found this helpful, let me know. But good luck out there. It is harder now, so study.